Welcome to the Due Diligence Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and for more than 10 years with SNN, I've been doing interviews with MicroCap management teams at investor conferences globally as well as online. Our SNN Live CEO video interviews are meant to pique interest, and then one can discover more by going to that company website. But personally, I always have more questions I want to ask. On this show, I'll be chatting with public company executives from microcap companies, and we'll dive deeper into companies that are rarely profiled. Microcap traditionally is overlooked, unloved, and absolutely never featured on legacy financial media outlets unless something material is going on. That's a good story. With my experience interviewing management teams, having interviewed most of them before, I've built up a network of companies, so there will be no shortage of content. Furthermore, this is an opportunity for me to showcase some of the qualitative lessons I've learned from guests on the Planet MicroCap podcast. You can expect high-quality interviews with management teams that may have exposure to broader macro trends that you may never have thought of. One of the many reasons why I love the microcap space. So if you love microcaps and especially love learning about companies before the professionals do, let's start our due diligence. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast. My guest on the show today is Todd Cravens, CEO of Galaxy Gaming, Inc. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is GLXZ on the OTCQB. Galaxy Gaming, Inc. is a gaming company that designs, develops, acquires, assembles, markets, and licenses proprietary casino table games and associated technology platforms and systems for the gaming industry. The company's proprietary table games comprise side bets, which are proprietary features and wagering options added to public domain games, such as poker, baccarat, Pow-Gow poker, craps, and blackjack table games, and premium games, which are standalone games with their own unique set of rules and strategies. It offers side bets under the Lucky Ladies, 21+3, and bonus craps titles, and premium games under the Heads Up Hold'em, High Card Flush, Cajun Stud, and 3-Card Poker. I think Galaxy Gaming has always stood out in my mind because at one of my first investor conferences, they had a blackjack table set up in the sponsor area. And when I was just getting my start on this microcap journey, I got to network and chat with fellow microcap investors over a couple games. I can't believe that was back in 2011, and the company has been through a lot since then. CEO Todd Cravens and I discussed quite a bit, including settling up corporate issues with Galaxy's former CEO, accelerating the business out of COVID, understanding Galaxy's business model, and the barrier to entry and moats around Galaxy Gaming. With that, please enjoy my conversation with Todd Cravens, CEO of Galaxy Gaming. Welcome, everyone, to the Due Diligence Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft. You can follow me on Twitter at Bobby K. Kraft. That's BOBBYKKRAFT. And joining me today is Todd Cravens. He's the president and CEO of Galaxy Gaming. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is GLXZ on the OTCQB. Todd, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Doing well.
It's great to have you on. So I like to start off every interview on the Due Diligence Podcast with what's, if you could describe the company in that one line, that one sweet one-liner, what would it be?
We are the Omni-Channel table game experts, which means we are in the gaming business. So we create games. I'm sitting at a gaming table right now, and we deliver content to casino customers throughout the world, both in brick and mortar and in the iGaming space.
Very good. All right. So now I can get into my little history. I've known this company since I came into the business. I remember going to an LD Micro and seeing the table. Everyone's out there, in between sessions, playing poker, playing something. And it's been an interesting ride to say the least. So I know you've joined the company, a few years ago now. But before we get into, you joined the company, then eventually becoming president CEO, can you provide that overview and history of the company and what was the original problem Galaxy Gaming was looking to solve?
Yeah, so the original problem or product of the company was about 23 or so years ago. The founder of the company, Rob Saucier, created a side bet to blackjack and essentially gives another betting opportunity to blackjack, a little bit higher house edge, if you will, a little bit more volatility. So the opportunity to win a bit more than you would on just a straight bet on blackjack. And so it was really one silk screen circle on a felt that grew into this business. And Rob was a hustler, and he built it up and went around to a lot of different casinos and started coming up with more games, and went out and licensed a few and went beyond blackjack games into poker games and a handful of other ones, and built it into a tidy little business. And then I joined the company a little over 5 years ago at the beginning of 2017.
Very good. And before we get into that, I mean, how has the company evolved or changed over time? Is the thesis still more or less the same?
Yeah, I mean, the thesis is still pretty much the same. We make great table games. I would say that the channels in which we derive our income or where we deliver it has totally changed. So I sit here on a table with green felt, which is typically what people would see in most casinos here, but we license our content to other electronic table games. So, you would sit at a terminal and you could play our content on that. And then one of the fast growing areas of our business is iGaming. So here in the States, there's only about 5 states that have legalized iGaming, which means if you're in the state of Pennsylvania or New Jersey or West Virginia, it's all geofenced. You can get on a website, be it DraftKings or FanDuel or what have you. And while they offer sports betting in many states, they offer iGaming only in a handful. So you could go online and play our games in those states through one of the operating casinos. So in the States, there's about 5 right now states that offer iGaming, but in the rest of the world, we're on roughly another 800 online casinos. So you have a lot more mature markets in the EU and UK where these iGaming casinos have been out there for a long period of time.
Got it. All
so
right.
We still make great content. We just deliver it through different channels now.
Got it. All right, we're gonna dig into all that in a little bit. I want to get to your background. As you mentioned, you joined the company back in January 2017 as vice president of business development, and then you were appointed CEO in July 2017. What originally attracted you to Galaxy Gaming, and we've kind of addressed this part about the thesis and how it's maybe changed slightly going more into iGaming, but I guess originally, what was it that attracted you about joining Galaxy Gaming?
Yeah, so originally I was at a different table games company for the 4 or 5 years before I joined the company. And it was a company called TCS John Huxley. And we made most of the world's roulette wheels and table games and all sorts of stuff, mostly manufacturing layouts and all that type of thing. And it was great when there was a casino opening or someone needed to redo their floor. But it was a CapEx business and it was very kind of lumpy, right? Casino opening, great month. No casino opening is not a great month. So I was looking for a business that had recurring revenue and that would kind of fill in those peaks and valleys that was somewhat adjacent to our business. And that was right around the time that Galaxy Gaming had the issue in California where California said, hey, we're not digging these guys, and the company had to leave the state of California. Again, the gaming industry is highly, highly regulated, right? It's a privileged license business, and we have to go in and get states. We have to get licenses by state, and in many situations by tribe if it's a Native American casino and things like that. So I was looking at this as an opportunity to say, okay, TCS should go and buy Galaxy. And so that was really kind of the introduction to the company, outside of the fact that when I would go travel, customers really, really liked this company. They were a really very small company at the time, but the customers, I always heard really positive things. So I got the owner of my company at TCS and Rob Saucier, who was the founder and CEO of Galaxy, in the same room. And they weren't able to get a deal done for whatever reason. And so at that point, I had decided that I was going to leave TCS just because I was looking for something a little bit more innovative to do and that type of thing. And Rob reached out to me, and I think that they were looking to bring on some more folks that had a pretty good sense of the business on things. And so when you want to bring someone on and you don't know where to put them, what do? You give them the business development title, and that's where I landed. So, during that period of time, what had happened is after California had said no to the company, the state of Nevada had called the company forward and said, we want you to go through the licensing process. And so in July of 2017, so about 6 months after I joined, is when Nevada Gaming had us in there, and it was a pretty rough session. And they said, we are looking for some fundamental differences in the makeup of the company in order for you to get your license. And so they worked really, really well with us, I thought. And so we made some changes to the company. At that time, Rob stepped down as the chairman and CEO, and Mark Lipparelli, who used to be on the gaming control board for Nevada, took the chairman's role, and I took the CEO role. And so that's really kind of how I got into my position. And after we did that, Nevada Gaming Control Board gave us the opportunity, and we got our license. And we thought, okay, we're set for go. Let's go open up every other jurisdiction there is. And, that structure didn't work for all of the other states. And so, as pretty well documented, we got to a point where we redeemed Rob's shares. We had lawsuits going back and forth, but ultimately, November of last year, we reached a settlement with Rob, and we were able to pay him out. And Rob was able to take his money, and he has exited the company fully. We don't have any ongoing relationship or owe Rob any further monies on things. And so now the company is really at a point where we don't have to worry about getting a license in a jurisdiction. Where can we go? Where can't we go? We're really at a point right now where, it's now time to turn on the afterburners and do that type of work.
Absolutely. I have to ask just real quick. I mean, that's 4 years. I mean, you're 4 years into your tenure as CEO, and that's something that's always been hanging over, the company in your
But I had 2 years of COVID at the same time. So don't,
yeah, right.
So we had a period of time where 2 or 3 months, I didn't have one casino open that was a paying customer. So, I would say when I look back on it, two things. We were able to go through all of the items, I think, with Rob, and even kind of accelerating out of COVID for a couple of reasons. I think the company did a really, really good job of continuing to take care of the customers. We actually even, the week that the world ended in March of 20, we sent out a press release that we aren't going to charge our customers. And as you can imagine, people were a little surprised on something like that. It was the right thing to do, right? We're not going to charge you if if everything's shutting down. Remember, March of 20, no one knew what this thing was really going to be. So I think there was that. And I think underlying that is that we have a pretty good business model. So as things came back online, our business is 100% recurring revenue. So if we can get people back online, if we can get people to take a few more tables, if we can get more placements in the iGaming space, our business model kind of can churn back up rather quickly on things. So, underlying, I think the issues that we dealt with COVID and those things, I think the team here did a really, really, really good job of taking care of our customers. And that's how we were able to bounce back rather quickly, I think.
All right. Is there anything else we missed from that tumultuous time that we didn't cover on here? Because otherwise I'd like to get into the business.
So many stories, but we should move on to the good stuff.
All right, let's do it. All right. So you mentioned the business itself. We talked about what the company is selling, table games, providing games for the iGaming space. Tell us a little bit about the business model itself. And you mentioned it's 100% recurring. So I'm sure people's ears are perking up and want to understand how that works.
Yeah, so basically, we're an IP company. We create games and we license that IP. So we think about our business in two separate, we call it kind of GG Core, which is the brick and mortar business, and then iGaming. So if we talk about the core, what we'll do is we'll license people the ability to deal our games. That's the easiest way to think about it. You want to put a side bet on blackjack. Okay, here's the price point. You can go out and print those games and deal those games. And again, remember what we do. We take blackjack that is, a 1% hold game, and you put a side bet on there, and we can increase that to 10% on the hold. So, what players are looking for a little bit more volatility into their gaming, right? So they want a bigger payout. What are operators looking for? Operators are looking for a better margin on things. And so we kind of do both of those things. So beyond that, what we'll also add is hardware and software on tables where we'll put a progressive on. So think of a tote board that goes up with each bet, gets a little higher, gets a little higher. So we can really, really create an elastic bet is what I call. So for $5, you can win $25,000. Not something you're really able to do on a lot of other table games. So we put more and more progressives out on tables because players are looking for that type of volatility in their game. And one of the things that's great is the more electronics we put out on a game, the stickier the content is, right? Once we put that out, people really are enjoying playing that, and we do really well with it. So most of what we do in the brick and mortar space is a fixed fee, and then in some markets we actually have a per bet fee, right? So, but again, it's recurring. In the iGaming space, it's a little bit different, where we participate and our deals are on a percentage of GGR, or gross gaming revenue. So in big round numbers or big terms, it's the amount of bets, the amount of payouts back to the player leaves gaming revenue, and then we take a percentage of that. So over time, math is your friend, but you could have a month where something overholds and you'll make a little bit more. You could have a month where a player beats a casino and you don't participate on that month. So there's a little bit more volatility, but over time, the theoretical will work itself out. So, so those are really kind of the differences, but each one is a monthly recurring revenue.
Got it. And how are GG's? I like the GG. We'll call you guys GG now. How are GG's games and your IP and the business model unique and different, maybe compared to some of your peers out there?
Yeah, it's a little bit different from a standpoint of brands, right? This whole thing right now is set up, and my friend Felicia's in the back. She's in charge of marketing. Her job is to make sure that 21+3 stays Coca-Cola and doesn't become RC Cola, right? The branding of our stuff is so important on things. And so, especially when we start to see our products go into the online space. And imagine if you're a player in Pennsylvania and they turn on iGaming and it's brand new to you. It is important that you have a brand on there that you trust. I know this game. I know how the math works. I know what the payouts are. And so one of the things that we've really seen, we talk about the Omni-Channel experience, is that our games and those brands in the land-based business have carried over so very well into the iGaming space because those games have been played for so long and are so well known. So over in the UK, where we have a very mature iGaming business, they've had iGaming for 15 plus years. The number one and number two games in the marketplace are 21+3 and Perfect Pairs. The reason is because those are the number one and number two games in the land-based business, and that's what people grew up playing on there. So because the strength of the brands, that is a little bit of the difference in there. And when you think about iGaming is kind of broken up this way. 80% of the business is slots, 20% of the business is table games. Many of our competitors are very, very focused on slots, and we love them to be focused on slots. We focus in on one thing, and our big competitors in the land-based also have a big slot element of their business. And so we have a pretty big tunnel focus, and people have been allowing us to go out there and exploit, both sides of the business.
Taking a step back, thinking coming out of COVID and, casinos, they've been open now for a while, but just the reopening of it. What does the competitive landscape look like for just we'll talk about on the, the in-person brick and mortar side of things. Has it been even more competitive getting floor space, or has that or are they right now just like, all right, we're going with the brands we know because we need to get, we're just trying to get the folks back here. Like what's been going on as we come out of COVID?
I would say yes and yes. I would say one of the biggest things, especially early on coming out of this, that our operators were having issues with were having table games dealers, right? So just dealing with issues as far as personnel like everybody else. And so there were situations where not all the tables were reopened at once, or certain pits were closed for a while. So there was this movement to these electronic gaming tables, right? So you don't need a person there, but you can play 21, you can play poker on there, what have you. The good news is that we also license our content to those places. We're starting to see that stuff free up a bit, where we're seeing more tables opening. So that is starting to come back for us. And then I would tell you that in regards to what they're looking for, the type of content, it's a whole lot easier for them to open a blackjack table than it is taking a flyer on a brand new carnival game, like a brand game like that. So to your point, that tried and true, but the good news is that we have a lot of blackjack product. We have a lot of baccarat product now. We have product for craps and things like that. So we're covered on what we call those public domain games, where we can enhance them with side bets.
Got it. And then on the iGaming side, I would assume that's more or less the same thing, right? Is people are willing to, I mean, you more or less said that just now, is that they're willing to take a chance on that user experience where you know the games, you know the brands, right?
Yeah, but I think that there are some differences. So we own 5 of the top 7 blackjack side bets in iGaming. And that's important for a number of reasons. As iGaming opens up in North America, blackjack is the #1 played game. And so we want to make sure that we build a moat around that. And that's pretty easy to do. We want to secondarily get deeper into our product portfolio. So games with roulette and games with craps. And we just went live with DraftKings on 3 or 4 states this week. They took bonus craps, one of our games, and that's live out there. But the thing that's a little bit different about iGaming than it is at a brick and mortar is that it's not a zero-sum game, right? I don't have a situation where I can only fit 10 games in an iGaming space. It's essentially unlimited shelf space. So if you have an opportunity, there's not a whole lot of other cost for them to, say, host another game up there. So I do think that there is this opportunity for us to come out with a handful of other creative style games that maybe you wouldn't see on a casino floor, or maybe someone's not willing to give up a table in a brick and mortar casino, but it doesn't really cost the guys in the iGaming space anything more there. So those are a couple of the differences. Yep, you got to have the tried and trues, which we've got covered and we've got nailed down, but hopefully we can get a little bit more creative and find some interesting things that we can do as well.
You know, I asked about competitive landscape, and I want to re-ask it in this sense. You know, what are your competitors doing that are also IP owners, game developers, you know, working with iGaming? Like what does that landscape look like right now?
Yeah, so it's pretty similar, right? It's just that on the iGaming side, like I said, there's a big focus in the slot side of the business because it is 80% of the pie today. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. In the brick and mortar space, you know, we have 2 pretty major competitors in AGS and Scientific Games, and they've been in the market for a while and they know what they're doing. So those are the guys that we run into. They also have some similar IP. I would say Scientific Games has a couple of brands that are really strong, like 3-Card Poker, Ultimate Texas Hold'em. And so just like we have some brand recognition on our content, they have it there. We own 3-Card Poker in the UK, which is great for us because we can do some fun stuff with that with our progressives. And then now it starts to come into what can you do with your electronics, right? So coming in, we have a progressive system that's been around for a while, a little dated. We'll probably do for something new. Stay tuned. And you know, what can you do with that? Can you start to deliver a better or more interesting experience that's not just about a progressive? Can you start to gather some data at the table that you can deliver back to the operator and say, here's some information about this player position or how someone is playing the game? What can you do with those types of things? And so I think a lot of the business is going to be continuing to offer great IP, but then secondarily with technology, what other types of layering can you do on that? You know, will there be a time where we can link a progressive to from the casino to someone in an iGaming space while they're playing at home on their iPad? I believe there will. And then you can start to do some really interesting things with those types of deals. And obviously, that becomes very interesting for as far as making sure that those tables stay on the floor and that content stays on the iGaming operator side. So I think there's a lot of really making sure you create awesome games, and then what can you do with that from a tech standpoint?
So I have to ask, because when we're talking about IP, creating content from a gaming company, I'm sure some folks might be like, wait, what? So can you explain how that works? Once you have an idea for a new game, how do you then own the intellectual property rights for that game? Because, I'm an idiot here thinking like, all right, I've been playing poker forever. Poker's been played in the Old West forever, and, blackjack forever, so how does that work?
So it, I would say, doesn't necessarily work all that well.
Okay.
About 6 or 7 years ago, there was a Supreme Court hearing that basically said you cannot patent math. And so a lot of the patents went away with table games. So really what you have now, it's all about IP, trademarks, branding, things along those lines. And, this one of the questions I get from a lot of investors is, well, why can't so-and-so do this? And, I tell them, well, we've got some big customers that have tried to do that. And the brand is just strong where people are looking to do to make sure that they're playing those types of games. Where you can really start to wrap around some tech on these things, or wrap around some patents around stuff, is when you can bring tech into it. So if you can wrap some IP around, a new way of doing a progressive or things along those lines, that's where you can do those things. So, but the brand itself, 21+3 is a great example. 21+3 is the number one side bet in the world. It's probably the number one table game in the world. The company bought 21+3, don't quote me, but I think around 2013. And every year since then, we've earned more money on 21+3. The brand endures. And my feeling is for each time someone plays 21+3, it reinforces the brand even that much more. We're at a point now that, between 21+3 and perfect pairs, we do about 1 billion bets a year online just on those two titles. So, the brands themselves, I think, are very, very strong. It's our job to make sure that they're even stronger, and we push them not just to the player, but to the operator, and that our regulators are aware of how strong they are, and then continue to do brand extensions off of those. So we have 21+3, we have 21+3 Extreme with a different pay table, Classic, and then we can put the progressives on there, and we can do multi-denominational progressives on there. So it's one of those things where, again, I always go back to Coke, Cherry Coke, Diet Coke, things like that. We want to build off of these brands and make them stronger and stronger.
Two follow-up questions to that. One is, you mentioned the business model a little bit, but you mentioned how 21+3 and the other brand was responsible for a billion bets replaced. What are the economics of that?
So this is, if you go back to that, that's where we participate in the gross gaming revenue. So when I say 1 billion bets, that can be of all sorts of denominations. And, it's the payouts after those bets of what that net amount is left for the operator that we participate in that. And so again, as I mentioned, most of our iGaming, just because there's only 5 states, there's still rest of the world. So only about 11% of the US population has access to iGaming, right? So we're big believers that over the next 4 or 5 years, a number of states, very similar to what we've seen with iGaming or with sports betting, more and more of those states come online with iGaming. I always kind of go back to Michigan, who last year launched, and they launched sports betting and iGaming at the same time. Sports betting is a 4 or 5% margin business, right? So we see all this, the DraftKings and all these types of ads all over the place, and that's a low margin business. iGaming is a better margin business. And so the tax revenue for the first month in Michigan off of sports betting was $111,000. And the tax revenue off of iGaming for the first month was $4 million. So I think what you'll start to see, I believe that the state of New York introduced an iGaming bill they just went live with sports betting not too long ago. We're believers that over the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to see more states come online with iGaming.
And then my another follow-up question I had to all of that was, you mentioned that you're licensing these games to other iGaming platforms.
Yeah.
What was that conversation? I mean, I'm assuming this conversation maybe happened in the boardroom of, all right, what model do we go down? Do we license it to these other platforms, or do we just develop our own individual platforms per game and then go from there? Was that even a conversation, or
it was a different conversation completely?
Oh, okay.
So when we went out and when I got to the company, we had an agreement in place with a company called PGP, and they owned all of our digital rights for iGaming distribution. I didn't love the contract, and this was, like I said, about 5 years ago. So iGaming wasn't really on anyone's mind as much as it is now. And it was a pretty tough contract. And so when it came up, I didn't have a whole lot of outs on the contract. Did have one out on the contract, and one of those outs was a change in control. And when the redemption of Mr. Saucier happened, he owned 58% of the company. And so when the redemption happened, that was a change in control. And what that allowed us to do was then to have a conversation with the PGP guys, and we entered into agreement and we bought the distribution rights back, as well as the rights to pairs and some other things. And so when we bought PGP, those agreements were already in place. So, and those would be agreements, direct agreements with DraftKings or direct agreements with developers that would create the games and then offer them to these iGaming folks. As we go forward, we're looking at all sorts of different ways. Do we develop games ourselves and offer them and change and get a little bit more vertical, or do we continue to license on different ways? And so we really like the business model. We're much more involved now in regards to look and feel because of the branding of these games now that we're involved, now that we own PGP. So we have a look and a feel and a sound of everything that we want people to see when they play one of our games. So we're much more involved on there, but those those agreements were already in place. The conversation was, should we buy PGP or not? And we agreed to do that in February of 20, right before the shutdown. And then we had to come up with a big old check by August of 20, which was no fun at that time. But it was the right thing for us to do. And, I think we're very, very happy that we're, right in the middle of the iGaming business. And, I think that we're going to continue to grow in that marketplace. So even though the timing was tough, we're glad we did it.
You mentioned one of the questions that I've grown to love asking management teams on this podcast. Yeah. And you mentioned about, sometimes investors getting, confused about, it's blanking on me exactly what it was that you mentioned, but what do investors get most confused about when they think of Galaxy Gaming? Probably even folks like me who've known the company for 10 plus years now, and it's gone through all these different iterations, kind of. But
I would say until 3 months ago, the two biggest questions were always around either the lawsuit that was pending with Mr. Saucier, and what are the real risk factors here of, could the shares go back? And if shares go back, what happens to licenses and things like that? So I would say that was a big concern. And then I think the questions around the brand IP and things like that. I think that it's interesting. I'm sure many of our investors at this point, and I think they have a pretty good handle on the business. I mean, we're pretty straightforward. We create games, we license IP throughout whatever channel someone wants to consume our content on. And we are big believers that strength in one channel gives us strength in the other channel. So I would say that investors are probably not confused about the business. I think investors were concerned about the risks that were with the business up to about 3 months ago.
Got it. Well, here I wanted to make this was one potential downside risk I was thinking about, preparing for our interview today, and also thus far. And it really speaks to the barrier to entry and, creating that moat that Galaxy Gaming is looking to accomplish. What's stopping somebody that has a good idea, for a game or maybe multiple games from, taking that brick and mortar share or taking some of the, the eyeballs and dollars away from, from the iGaming apps? What is that barrier to entry in that moat, and why is it not as simple potentially as that?
I mean, gaming again is a bit of a walled garden, right? We have these privileged licenses. So if you want to take a game and go countrywide, the amount of time it takes for a new company and a new game to get licensed in every single state with every single tribe is really, really tough. So what you see now is more and more developers that will come up with a game and they'll talk to us, they'll talk to AGS, they'll talk to Scientific Games, because we have the licenses, we have the distribution network, things like that. And then there's a royalty rate typically back with that. So, I don't ever want to say that there can never be another entry into it, but because of that type of walled garden that we have on the brick and mortar side, that's really kind of the path for someone that has the next great idea, is to work with someone that has that distribution out there. The other part about it is that, as I mentioned earlier, the progressives and the technology is really, really important to be able to layer on top of games. So the cost to then develop your own on that is another 2 years, 3 years, going through the lab, probably a 7-figure development cycle, things like that. So the good news is if we continue to do a better job in opening up more casinos and have more tables, we're a better and better partner for people bringing us great new games.
So I want to talk about TAM, the total addressable market. Yeah. How would you define that for the gaming space that you're in right now?
Yeah, so I think about it this way. There's roughly 3,000 brick and mortar casinos in the world. We're in north of 500 of them. Not all 3,000 of them all have table games. The focus of the company to date has really been, I would say, North America and UK. We have some smattering of some products in Europe and in North Africa and things like that. But we have a lot of blue ocean, if you will, right? We don't have a whole lot in Latin America right now. We want to take the strength of Perfect Pairs and 21+3 that we have in the UK and start to march out to Europe. We've made some investments in being able to do that. But there's other markets out there, Australasia, that we now have the right product for. We did not have, in my opinion, the right Baccarat product until October of last year. Since that time, and with the placements that we've put out with Baccarat, I feel like we're on a path where we now have a product that we're going to be able to bring to Asia, which is a heavy table games market, number one, and Baccarat product number two. So that's how I think about the size of the TAM, if you will, in brick and mortar. In the iGaming world, again, if we think about North America and the US right now, only about 11% of the US population, or about 30 million people, have access to iGaming. iGaming is opening up now in South America. iGaming goes live in Ontario with about 13 million people on April 4th of this year. And then the rest of the world business probably continues to grow at a 10 to maybe 12% number on there. And again, that's a little bit difficult, right? Because they're virtual, right? And so they're not constricted by brick and mortar. People will move pretty quickly around things. People might move from one game to another. So, the overall TAM on iGaming, I still think it's a big mover on things. And the other issue that is, people have heard about is, which markets are, gray markets out there, black markets. We steer away from all of that out there because of our privileged licenses that we have here in the States and beyond. So it's a little bit difficult on the iGaming. There have been some eye-popping numbers out there. I don't re-quote those because they're too eye-popping and people get very, very excited very quickly. I think about 10 to 12% growth in rest of the world. And I think in North America, that can grow probably much, much faster over the next 4 to 5 years.
I really appreciate you not giving that number because I'm sure
it's ridiculous.
We're a sub 100 million market cap company and we're going after a gazillion, badillion. I appreciate
that's not my MO, right? You know, as I did have one investor, he gave me some good advice. He said, you worry about the E, I'll worry about the P. So
nice.
I don't play that game.
I like that. Well, speaking of that, you know, what would you say is the thesis that, if realized, these are the inflection points that will lead to growth in shareholder value?
Yeah, well, I think November was a big one, right? You know, that ability that we have, this clear sailing as far as opening up all the jurisdictions that require privileged licenses. I think that was a big one. Number two, I would say, is increased and better product, right? So we have a 3-year roadmap now that is pretty stocked full of both IP as well as technical products on items. We have some changes in opening up new categories next year that are going to be a little bit different than what we do today. And then I think it's the growth of iGaming in 2 areas. It's not just getting more population available to iGaming, but it is getting beyond just the blackjack content that we have. Like I said, getting deeper into the product portfolio with some of the roulette product and some of the craps product, excuse me, and some of the poker products out there. So right now we do extremely well in the blackjack area. And now we want to make sure, as I said, build a moat, you know, so you have our brand extensions on there. And then thirdly, can we come up with some interesting ideas for the live dealer space of the business? It's not something you would necessarily see in iGaming. So, you know, I would look to say, as you start to see more markets open, as you start to see different product releases open, our business, like I said, being an IP business, is that, you know, we try and run the business where we can grow between the high teens and low 20s. On the top line, and we try to grow our expenses at less than half that. And the folks that have kind of done the back of the envelope on that can figure out some math, and it usually works out pretty well.
Very good. All right, I want to get to some corporate questions. We're at that part of the interview. Hold on, let me get my suit and tie for this part.
I'm gonna go get my attorney.
Yeah, right. So the company's been acquisitive since you've taken the reins as CEO. Can you discuss the company's capital allocation strategy and framework, and maybe discuss were there some failures or successes, or let's get some story time on the worst deal you've ever done, the best deal. Let's go from there.
Yeah, I mean, we as far as major, we've only done really one major acquisition, I would say, at this point, and we've done a handful on some IP items, and some good and some bad, but those have been really kind of low risk ones, if you will. The way we think about acquisitions now is this something that is going to add to the portfolio? Is it something that's going to add, you know, we're being the size that we are, we can't talk about the fact that this is going to add to EBITDA 3 years from now, right? This stuff has to be instant. I think the best example of that was when we bought PGP, the iGaming company. And at the end of the day, you know, we ended up buying an iGaming company at a multiple well less of what iGaming companies go for these days. And I think from a shareholder standpoint, the purchase of PGP and the use of a little bit of equity and how we did it at that time was the right thing for us to do. Thank God we used a little bit of equity, because again, I had to write that check in August of 20 when the world was still, you know, half closed and doing those things. And so I would say that was probably the best acquisition, and probably the scariest because of the timing of things, right? In having to write a $6 million check, it's only going to leave you about 2 in the bank or so at the time, something along those lines, and you're scrambling and getting in, you know, Main Street loan program, and we were doing PPP, and we're still getting the deal done. Long term, it was absolutely the best thing to do, but I would tell you that was probably the bigger, that was the biggest nail biting deal that we've done at that time as well, because it was big numbers for us, and but it turned out to be a really, really good deal for the company.
How much, if at all, have shareholders influenced your decision-making process?
I would say probably very little, and the reason I would say that is I am a shareholder. Harry, who's our CFO, is a shareholder. You know, Liparelli is our chairman, shareholder, and all those guys. We think about this business through that lens anyway.
And I had someone ask me the other day, an investor said, what would you do differently if you were private? And, my answer is nothing, honestly. I think that as we've looked at things, I think time and again, I think we do look at it through a shareholder's lens. When we went and had to go out and raise the money for the settlement with Saucier in November, one of the things that we had to do is that because we had taken out a Main Street loan, one of the covenants of the Main Street loan was that you couldn't retire any other debt ahead of that. So we had to retire the bank debt, we had to retire the Main Street loan program and Saucier debt. So we went out and raised 60-ish million or so. And I think that there was a high anticipation from shareholders that it was going to be very dilutive out there. And it turned out we went out and did all debt, and we had 3% or so in warrants on there. And I think a lot of the shareholders were really pleased to see that. And, we would have done it that way if we were public or private, because I think the people in this company believe in it. I've not sold a share. Harry's never sold a share. Nobody on the board has ever sold a share. And so investors, we appreciate them. I talk to them pretty regularly on there, but I think we're all kind of in the same boat on things. And so I don't think they have to worry that, we're thinking things a little bit differently than that.
Right. So what makes you most excited when you wake up in the morning? You're like, man, I run Galaxy Gaming. And then conversely, what's just a drag?
I would tell you that the thing I'm probably most excited about right now is that we have the best team that we've had since I've been here. We spend a tremendous amount of time on recruiting really, really good folks. And so number one, I enjoy coming to work every day. And I think that this is a place where we've recruited really, really good people. Even in this marketplace where it's been tough to recruit personnel, I think 5 or 6 of the last people we've hired have all been referrals from current employees on there. And so, I would say that I really enjoy developing teams and seeing people do more. And I would tell you that I'm a bit in a transition myself in regards to my day-to-day. So when COVID hit, Harry and we were in every meeting, right? We needed to make sure that this thing was going to stay afloat. So, how much money's in the till, and basically I said, I'll take the front of the house and you take the back of the house. And when this thing's over, I'll meet up with you and let's see where we are. And so I'm in a transition now as we're coming out and the strength of the company is being seen, where I got to get out of every meeting, right? And I need to be a bit more strategic. And so I need to put, people in place to, really drive this part of the business or develop these types of games. And I need to let go and let some of these people flourish on things. So I would tell you that 70% or so of my time is making sure that I'm getting out of those in the weeds deals, and that I'm getting and focusing on the more strategic things and thinking about what are we doing 3 years from now, and getting out of people's way. I mean, we've got really, really good people here, and I need to let them do their job. So, I think that's the thing that's the most exciting for me right now. And at times, quite honestly, challenging, because when you're in a small business, I'm not used to not knowing every single thing that's going on, but the business grows and you have to trust people. So I would say that that's the biggest thing. The thing that I don't love to do right now, it's hard for me because, as you mentioned earlier, when you go through the last 4.5, 5 years of, dealing with the lawsuits and the regulatory issues, and then you deal with COVID and all those things, and then you wake up at the beginning of 22 and COVID is mostly in the background, and you have this iGaming arm that you bought, and that thing's humming along pretty good, and you can kind of go into all these other areas. You're looking around and like, this is pretty good stuff. Like, this is good. I think that it's 3 things for me. It's I want to make sure that we continue to recruit and have the best people, right? First and foremost. Number 2, we have to continue to stay innovative on things and make sure that we create great products. And we have to continue to take care of our customers.
If there's one thing that I don't love as much is I haven't been able to spend as much time with customers as I used to sitting in this seat. But, there's very little that I brag on in regards to this business except one thing, and that is our net promoter score. And when we talk about customers, a net promoter score is, world-class companies usually have like a 70 or something. I think that's where Apple is. Over the last year, I think we've averaged 95 plus on that. And what that tells me is that customers like what we're doing for them. And if we create more and interesting products, they'll probably take more of it. So, my thoughts or what keep me up at night are we servicing our customers and making sure no one else, someone else isn't doing it? And are we coming up with great products for them to take? And so, those are, I would say, not the things that I don't like doing, but those are the worries. And those are the things that drive us to make sure that we're going to continue to deliver for those guys.
So I only have a couple more questions for you. My next one, and you've alluded to the success part, but what does success and what does failure look like to you?
They're the three same words for both, right? It's people, customers, and products. If we don't have the best people here, everything just goes to hell, right? It just goes to hell. And it's one of the things that we have to really think about going forward. It has been the Harry and Todd show for the last 4 or 5 years. We've been a smaller company and we're getting through COVID, and we need to make sure that works. Harry and I go to Chipotle one day for lunch, get hit by a Mack truck. That's not good for the business, right? So getting those other people and letting people do their jobs and filling out and having more folks on the executive level that can run this business once Harry and I are told to hit the bricks, I think that's a big part of it. On the product side of things, while you have 21 plus 3 and perfect pairs that just continue to go on forever, you still need to fill things back up. And that's why I'm encouraged by the new Baccarat product, right? I believe by the end of the year, that'll be a 7-figure a year recurring revenue business, and it'll only take us 12 months to get there. And so creating those types of games and products and finding new channels for that content to go into. And then, we need to lock down our customers, and we need more customers on things. And so we have taken some steps. We have added a number of salespeople, so we have more time with customers, and it's not about selling them all the time. It's walking the floors, what's working for you, what's not working for you. Do we need to swap something out? So, we're a very, very high touch business. And I think that is our secret sauce, our ability to customize a pay table for a customer. The fact that our service guys are they're the best. They're just complete badasses. What we get, we send out a survey after every service call, and this is where we get our net promoter score. And the comments that we get from customers they're just awesome. And so, we need to stay high touch, because if we don't, someone else will. So I think of success as those three things. And I think failure is just the opposite if we don't take care of those three things. And so, again, we're a pretty simple business, and I'm a pretty simple person. And we try and just kind of narrow it down to, 3 or so things to focus on. And if we execute well, our business model is very, very good. And so for us, I think 22 is all about execution and setting up a really, really interesting 23.
My final question for you, but before we let you go here, do you enjoy being a public company CEO? It's funny. You got that question, from an investor saying, would you do the same things as a private company CEO? And it's kind of a similar question here. Is like, there's one thing, enjoying waking up and being running your business and being excited about it. But then it's another thing about, being that public company CEO. So do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I would tell you that for a company our size, being a public company, it's been, it's difficult now, right? In fact, I was just talking to Harry about this at lunch, and, there's just added costs and audits and things like that. And there's just a high bar for a public company. And when you're the size we are, what I don't want is I don't want more accountants than salespeople, right? So from that standpoint and the regulatory items and the compliance items that is required of that, that's no fun, right? However, being a smaller company and being a company where, the stock has performed decently for the last little bit, is that if I want to go out there and find talent to a company where I maybe are able to compete with them on a strict salary, but I can offer them some equity on something like this, that has been a way for us to attract really, really good talent. So from that standpoint, I think that, that gives us some abilities. But on the day-to-day stuff, and I won't speak for Harry and his team because they have to live it every day. But it's filling out forms and talking to auditors all the time and things like that is probably not the number one thing I'd want to be doing. So, but those are the gifts of the.
Hey man, and you said you're being very humble. I mean, since you were announced as CEO on July 26, 2017, as of close yesterday. I mean, the stock has performed just over 470%. So when you say decent, yeah, sure, decent.
We still have some more work to do. So, and we'll continue to execute, and hopefully that number gets a little bit higher.
Sure thing. All right. Well, Todd, with that, where can our audience go and find more information to follow along the Galaxy Gaming story?
We're, on, I think most of the socials out there and things like that, but we're at galaxygaming.com. We do a pretty good job of press releases. We have some new content and some new product coming out this year. So I would have people keep their ears and eyes open on that type of stuff. And, we appreciate the folks that have jumped on the bandwagon with us thus far. And, our goal is to continue to execute for everyone.
Very good. Todd, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Stay safe. And I look forward to our next update.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.